My parents skipped my wedding because I married before my favored sister. Not because they were sick. Not because of an emergency. They stayed home because I had the audacity to marry before my younger sister, Maggie, the daughter who mattered to them more than I did. 10 months ago, I married the love of my life. My in-laws were there. Friends filled the seats. Even distant cousins showed up. But the front row? Empty. 2 chairs with white ribbons for the family who refused to see me walk down the aisle. My sister didn't come either. But honestly, I expected that. What I didn't expect was that their choice to stay away would set off a chain of events that came back to haunt them. Hi, I'm Brianna, 31. And the story I'm about to tell you will leave you speechless. But before we begin, tell me where you're listening from. I need to see I'm not alone. And subscribe if you believe in justice. Let's dive in. Growing up, I learned that I was the least favorite daughter because I wasn't as beautiful as my mother. Shocking, right? It's true. My mother, Betty, was a striking woman. Tall, elegant, with sharp cheekbones and honey-colored hair that she'd always worn in soft waves. She carried herself like someone who knew she was beautiful and expected the world to notice. When Maggie was born, 2 years after me, my mother found what she'd been waiting for: a mirror. Maggie inherited everything. The same delicate features, the same hair that caught the light, the same graceful way of moving through a room. By the time Maggie could walk, people would stop my mother in grocery stores to comment on how identical they looked. My mother would beam, her hand resting protectively on Maggie's shoulder. "She's my little twin," she'd say, her voice warm with pride. I stood beside them, holding the grocery bags. Every milestone Maggie reached became a celebration. First steps? My mother threw a family brunch. First dance recital? She invited everyone we knew and recorded it from 3 different angles. When Maggie won her first spelling bee at age 7, my mother had the certificate professionally framed and hung it in the hallway. I won a regional science competition that same year. My mother said, "That's nice, sweetheart," and asked me to help fold laundry. It wasn't just about achievements. It was about who we were. Maggie was the reflection my mother wanted to see. I was something else. Broader shoulders, my father's darker coloring, a quieter presence that didn't command a room the way they did. My mother enrolled Maggie in modeling classes when she turned 12. She drove her to auditions, waited in lobbies for hours, and kept a portfolio thicker than any family photo album. When Maggie booked her first commercial, my mother cried actual tears of joy. I graduated high school with honors that same year. My mother attended the ceremony, but spent most of it texting Maggie's agent. The comparisons became a language I learned to speak fluently. "Maggie never struggles with staying in shape. Your sister has such natural confidence. If you tried a little harder, maybe you'd shine like she does." I tried. God knows I tried. I joined the clubs my mother suggested, took the classes she recommended, even attempted modeling for one humiliating summer. Maggie laughed when she found out. Said I wasn't built for it. My mother didn't disagree. By my mid-20s, I stopped trying to earn what should have been given freely. I focused on my career in software development, built friendships with people who valued me, and learned to keep family interactions surface level. It hurt less that way. Then I met Tony when my friend dragged me to a Saturday morning financial literacy workshop. I went for the free coffee. He went because he genuinely cared about budgeting spreadsheets.
He sat beside me.
Noticed I kept rolling my eyes at the speaker and whispered a joke that made me choke on my drink. We started talking afterward. Somehow the conversation didn't stop. He asked for my number like he already knew we were going somewhere. For the first time, someone saw me without comparing me to anyone else. When he proposed after 4 years together, with takeout containers on the coffee table and our favorite show paused in the background, it felt perfectly right. I called my parents the next day to share the news. The silence on the other end stretched too long. Finally, my mother spoke. "Are you sure about this? You might want to wait. Maybe lose a bit of weight before the wedding photos." My father said nothing at all. The engagement party should have been joyful. Instead, I watched my parents huddle in the corner, their faces tight with something I couldn't quite name. Tony noticed it too. "Your mom's been on the phone for 20 minutes, he whispered. "She keeps saying this wasn't the plan." Later, Tony told me what he'd overheard. My parents were talking to Maggie, who was crying. They kept repeating that they never expected me to get married first. That everything was happening wrong. Maggie wasn't even dating anyone seriously. Wedding planning became a minefield. My mother had Pinterest boards full of ideas, but they were all labeled Maggie's dream wedding. When I asked for help choosing a venue, she said she was too busy. When I found my dress, a beautiful A-line gown that made me feel confident, she looked at it for 3 seconds and said, "Well, it's practical for your figure." Maggie reached out to Tony directly 2 days later, asking if they could meet for coffee. She framed it as an olive branch, a chance to repair what she called the sibling misunderstanding. Tony agreed, mostly out of curiosity. He recorded the entire conversation on his phone. When he came home that evening, he played it for me. Maggie's voice was soft, concerned, almost sisterly. "I just worry about Brianna," she said. "Marriage is such a big step, and I'm not sure she's emotionally ready for it. She's always struggled with insecurity, you know? Maybe slowing down would help her adjust." Tony had cut her off immediately. "Brianna is exactly where she needs to be," he'd said, his tone cold. Then he left. Listening to the recording, I felt something shift. This wasn't sibling rivalry. This was sabotage. While my family refused to help with the planning, my future mother-in-law, Mrs. Carroll, stepped in. She took me dress shopping, helped with centerpieces, held my hand when I cried over seating charts. She treated me like the daughter she'd always wanted. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Carroll, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Brianna, I need to tell you something. Your mother just called me." My stomach dropped. "She asked me to convince you and Tony to postpone the wedding. For a few years. To give Maggie time." The world tilted. "I told her," Mrs. Carroll continued, her voice firm, "that we cannot pause our children's dreams for anyone else's timeline." Then I hung up. That conversation left a hole in my ear, but I was happy to have Mrs. Carroll by my side. I sent out invitations weeks before the wedding. Electronic ones with read receipts and physical ones with tracking. My parents received both. The electronic invitation showed they'd opened it. The physical one was delivered and signed for. They never RSVP'd. I called, texted, emailed. Every message was ignored or met with vague responses about being busy and needing to check schedules. The wedding day arrived anyway. It was beautiful. A garden ceremony in the morning light, followed by an afternoon celebration with people who loved us. The weather was perfect. My dress fit like it was made for me. Tony cried when I walked down the aisle, escorted by his father, since mine wasn't there. Everyone said we looked radiant. And we were happy, genuinely happy. But there were moments when their absence felt like a physical weight. The empty front row seats with white ribbons. The father-daughter dance I couldn't participate in. The mother of the bride toast that never happened. I smiled through it all. But part of me was screaming inside. A few weeks later, a coworker asked during lunch why my parents weren't in any of my wedding photos. I laughed it off, said they'd been traveling. But I sat in my car in the parking lot afterward, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, and cried so hard I couldn't catch my breath. The lie had come so easily. That's what hurt most. After the honeymoon, I needed answers. I finally reached my parents on the phone. My mother didn't even let me speak first. "We're deeply hurt, Brianna. We never received a formal invitation. How could you exclude us from something so important? I always dreamed of helping plan my daughter's weddings, and you shut me out." I pulled up my phone records. The delivery confirmation. The read receipts. "Mom, I have proof. You received both invitations." I said, "You must have sent them to the wrong address." She replied, "You've lived in the same house for 30 years. I countered, "Well, we never saw them." I didn't argue. What was the point? I apologized for the confusion and hung up. Tony found me on the couch an hour later, staring at nothing. "They're gaslighting you," he said quietly. "They were shocked when you got engaged." They avoided every planning meeting. They couldn't handle that you were getting married before Maggie. The truth settled over me like cold water. This was never about invitations. It was about control, about their perfect image, with Maggie at the center, crumbling because I had stepped out of line. Family members started asking questions. In group chats I wasn't part of, apparently, relatives were wondering why my parents hadn't attended. I kept my answers simple and honest. They couldn't accept that I married before Maggie. No embellishment, just truth. And truth has a way of spreading. One by one, extended family members began sharing their own stories. An aunt mentioned how my mother had always positioned Maggie front and center at family weddings. A cousin remembered how every holiday card featured Maggie prominently while I was cropped half out of frame. Then Maggie got engaged to someone she'd been dating for barely a year. The family group chats exploded with my parents' excitement. My mother was already booking high-end venues, scheduling private dress fittings, planning the kind of elaborate event she'd refused to help me with. But something unexpected happened. People started declining their invitations. Important family members, people who were supposed to have key roles, quietly withdrew their support. The exclusive venue my parents had secured through family connections? Suddenly unavailable. A family friend who owned a luxury bridal boutique? Scheduling conflicts. My parents panicked. They started calling relatives one by one, trying to control the narrative. They claimed I was spreading lies out of jealousy, that I'd purposely excluded them from my wedding to play the victim. It backfired spectacularly. At a family gathering, someone innocently asked to see my wedding photos. My mother lost control. She launched into a defensive rant about how marriage had changed me, how I was trying to destroy the family, how jealousy was poisoning me. Relatives who hadn't known the full story stared in shock. The perfect family facade cracked wider. My grandmother, Betty's own mother, called me a week later. "Brianna, I'm hosting a family meeting. We need to resolve this." "Grandma, I don't think." "Please." For me. I agreed. Mostly because I loved my grandmother and couldn't say no to her. The meeting was held in her living room. My parents sat on one side, Maggie beside them. I sat across with Tony. My grandmother positioned herself in the middle, her lined face etched with concern. "We're family," she began. "This division needs to end." My mother jumped in immediately. "Brianna has been spreading terrible stories about us. We've always treated our daughters equally." Something inside me broke open. Equally? My voice came out stronger than I expected. "You hung Maggie's first modeling headshot above the fireplace. Where's my college diploma? You threw parties for her spelling bees. You barely acknowledged my graduation. That's not. You spent years planning Maggie's imaginary wedding. You couldn't help me pick out flowers for my real one." Maggie scoffed. "You're being dramatic. This is exactly why you don't have close family relationships." "I don't have close family relationships because I was never allowed into this family," I shot back. "I don't look like Mom. I'm not her mirror. So I don't matter." My mother's face twisted. "How dare you? After everything we've done for you? You've always been jealous of Maggie. Always trying to take her shine." The words hit like a slap. Tears spilled down my cheeks. But then my grandmother spoke, her voice sharp as glass. "Betty, that is enough." My mother turned to her, shocked. "I have watched you favor one daughter over the other for 30 years, my grandmother continued. "I held my tongue because I hoped you'd grow out of it. But this," she gestured at the room, "missing your daughter's wedding because she married before her sister? That's not favoritism. That's cruelty." "Mom, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Grandma cut her off. "Maggie looks like you, so you see her as an extension of yourself. Brianna doesn't, so you've spent her entire life making her feel invisible." My mother stood abruptly. "You're all against me. Against us." She grabbed her purse. Maggie followed, shooting me a look of pure venom. But as they left, something shifted inside me. They were leaving, walking away, and I wasn't chasing them. For the first time, I felt light. The next week, Maggie sent me a message dripping with condescension. "What you said to Mom and Dad, was completely inappropriate. They've given us everything. You can't blame them for your insecurities. Not everyone can meet certain standards, Brianna, and that's okay. But trying to ruin my wedding because yours wasn't perfect? That's petty. I blocked her number. An hour later, Tony's phone buzzed. Multiple texts from Maggie, sent to his personal number. As Brianna's sister, I feel I should reach out. She's very sensitive, and I'm worried about how this is affecting your marriage. Then, family dynamics are complicated. Someone like Brianna might not understand the bigger picture. And finally, maintaining good relationships with successful family members like me could benefit your future. Brianna's behavior is only hurting her prospects. And yours. Tony stared at his phone, then started laughing. She's trying to manipulate me. She actually thinks I care about her business connections. He typed out a response. I support Brianna's happiness, not her family's dysfunction. Direct future concerns to her. Maggie's final message came through minutes later. I see she's poisoned you too. Tony called her back immediately. I could hear his voice, calm and cutting. Maggie, you're a manipulator who will burn everyone around you to feed your own ego. Get a life. He hung up before she could respond. Then blocked her number. My parents kept trying to salvage their reputation. They called relatives, sent group emails, rewrote history in every conversation. But each attempt revealed more truth. An uncle came forward about how my mother had once asked him to uninvite me from a family wedding so Maggie could bring an extra friend. An aunt shared how my childhood birthday parties were always scheduled around Maggie's activities. Key supporters continued withdrawing from Maggie's wedding plans. The perfect day my mother had been orchestrating for decades was unraveling. Then, a month later, everything collapsed. Maggie's fiancé, Sean, called off the wedding. According to family whispers, he cited her rude attitude and lack of respect for people. He didn't elaborate. He simply ended it and walked away. Maggie was devastated. My mother called me, her voice shaking with rage. Are you happy now? Your jealousy has destroyed your sister's life. I had nothing to do with Sean's decision. I replied. Everything was perfect until you started spreading lies. Then in a calm voice I told her, Mom, Sean made his own choice based on who Maggie is. That has nothing to do with me. She hung up. Through the family grapevine, I heard that Maggie blamed me for everything. In her mind, I'd orchestrated some elaborate revenge plot. It never occurred to her to look at her own behavior, to consider that Sean saw the same entitlement and manipulation that had poisoned our family for years. It's been months now since my wedding. The perfect family image my parents built has collapsed entirely. Extended family gatherings happen without them because people are tired of the drama. Maggie has withdrawn from social media, her carefully curated life suddenly private. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel vindicated. I feel free. Tony and I are building a life together. We're planning a trip to Italy. We're talking about eventually buying a house with a big backyard. We're creating traditions that have nothing to do with favoritism or mirrors or impossible standards. Tony came home one evening carrying a thick leather-bound book I'd never seen before. He set it on the coffee table without a word. Inside were ticket stubs from our first date, photos he'd secretly taken of me laughing at something ridiculous, little sticky notes I'd written and forgotten about. There was a pressed flower from my wedding bouquet, carefully preserved between wax paper. On the last page, he'd left a blank space with a single title written in his careful handwriting, The Family We're Building. Something inside me broke open, but not from pain, from relief. This was my real family. The one I chose. The one that chose me back. I looked at Tony, tears blurring my vision, and for the first time in months, they were happy tears. Sometimes I think about what I wanted as a child. I wanted parents who saw me,
Who celebrated me.
who loved me without conditions. I don't have those parents. I probably never will. But I have something better.
I have people who chose me.
A husband who stands beside me. In-laws who treat me like family. Friends who show up. And I have myself. The woman who survived being invisible and found her own light anyway. The facade my parents spent decades maintaining is gone. But I'm still standing. Stronger than I've ever been. Sometimes the best revenge isn't action. It's simply refusing to carry someone else's shame anymore. I set that burden down months ago. And I've never felt more whole. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories. Your support keeps us going.